What's up, everybody? Welcome. Second Ask Joe Anything of 2024. Today, we've got a great stream for you. We're going to be talking a lot about events. We are getting to that time of the year where we're going to start our conference circuit. So a lot of events to go through, including one that is very near and dear to my heart, and that being CyberArk Impact, where I always have the most fun with all of the customers that like to come out and hang out with us this year in Nash Vegas. We'll be talking to a very, very, very special friend of mine, Mike Bykat, about cloud security at CyberArk. We'll be touching on some secure cloud access, taking a look at some just-in-time access to cloud resources, and talking about everything pertaining to cloud security today. And then going into the second hour, we'll open it up for your questions and our answers from our end. So with that all said, I will preface everything with the fact that my dog, Callie, has been a little skittish lately. And so she's in the office with me today. She's actually at my feet with her favorite blanket right now. So she's calm and cool and collected right now, but when the kids get home around 3 p.m. Eastern time, things may get a little interesting while I try to shuffle her out when she wants to see them get home from school. So we'll have fun with that, I'm sure, about an hour from now. Regardless, though, like I said, a lot of things to talk about. Definitely going to be interacting with the chat today. So if you are watching this live and not on demand, feel free to interact with us through the chat. We will be monitoring and watching it throughout this entire stream. again around 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to flip over and start answering your questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to also put those in the live chat as well. And I'll be reminding everyone throughout the first hour about that. So without further ado, I want to bring on my guest of this Ask Joe Anything. He is our cloud security subject matter expert, dealing with everything cloud security. A couple of the things we'll be talking about today, but it definitely spans more than that. His name is Mike Bykat. Mike, welcome. How are you?
I'm awesome, Joe. How you doing, man?
Doing great, doing great. So, this year there's been a lot of changes when it comes to cloud security. You've been with cloud security since the beginning, but why don't you kind of tell everyone a little bit about before you made it to cloud security and how you got there for us?
Yeah, for sure. So, not quite as tenured as Mr. Joe Garcia, but been at CyberArk a little over 4.5 years, coming on 5 years later in 2024. Started as a SC in the Southeast region out of Atlanta, and then kind of worked my way up to solutions architect, and definitely saw that there was the growth and the need around cloud security, whatever that means for each and everyone out there. And CyberArk started investing and making sure we were having thought leadership in the space. And so for about the last year and a half, I've been primarily focused as the solution strategy architect for that group here.
Awesome. So what about before CyberArk though? What did you do before CyberArk? Were you a customer? Were you not? And you just kind of were like, how did you even find CyberArk, right? If you weren't I've always wondered that because I came from being a customer. So I already
Yeah.
knew CyberArk, but I've never like had that sort of an intro to it.
So you mean there's actually a before CyberArk? I can't remember that far back.
I
Yeah, no,
know,
but
right?
before before CyberArk, I did a little bit of everything for a few years. I worked at, we called it boutique IT shop that did IT consulting for small, medium-sized businesses that didn't have their own IT center within their organization. So everything came across my desk, from firewalls to SQL database deployments to troubleshooting the virus that someone clicked on the wrong thing on their system. So I got my hands dirty with all sorts of things across the IT world. And then I went to a company that was sort of a startup still in the Atlanta area called AirWatch. They were
Okay.
focused on securing mobile devices. So, everybody started getting mobile devices, and it was right after Blackberries
Yeah.
with BlackBerry MMS and everything like that. And they needed a way to make sure that company emails were essentially secured on iPhones and
Yeah.
Androids, and they ended up getting purchased by VMware. Then I went to AT&T, which was a reseller of AirWatch, and helped them start up their enterprise mobility management team that was focused around AirWatch and other products.
Yeah.
And then it was time for a change. I was ready to go pure security space, and I knew a couple people who had made their move over to CyberArk. So I inquired, and here I am.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, I was going to mention that I know of a couple people from AirWatch. I didn't know you necessarily came from AirWatch, but I have a
Yes.
pretty good idea of how you got pulled over. If
Mr. Andy
but
Gibbons, we can say his name. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure there's Andy and didn't BT also come from AirWatch too
He
at one
did,
point?
but I think if I hear him tell that story, it was maybe a 2 week spurt. It wasn't
Yeah,
maybe it was
that's
a
what I've
2 month,
heard.
but it wasn't a long period of time over there. Andy and I were over there a little bit longer.
Cool. And so was this one of those companies that were like early MDM type situation? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, it was right on the tail. So I was a Bez admin, so I was pretty well, informed with what BlackBerry Enterprise Server could do and stuff. But
right. We kind of
when
put the
that,
Bez admins out of service in a sense, because those kind of became
yeah,
legacy when iPhones took over the space.
they did it really well for a while there. I mean,
Yeah,
Bez was the standard, So
yeah,
I it was. Yeah, I mean, I remember we could really lock those things down, but in a way that didn't the user of the phone didn't really, right? They weren't affected much by it.
Right.
I know the initial mobile device management that was applied to like my iPhone, my earlier iPhone, like some of the earlier MDM, they would install like complete lockdown profiles on your phone and stuff and really
They
take
could
over everything.
factory wipe it if they wanted to.
Yeah, I didn't like that too much. Like, I
Yep.
knew you could do that with the BlackBerry, but it wasn't my phone that I was giving to you to do it to, right? They were giving me a BlackBerry too because it was a part of the bundle that they got with the server and everything.
Yeah.
So when it turned into a bring your own device situation, that's when I was kind of but I imagine that's where AirWatch kind of, picked up the ball and ran with it, was when the smartphones hit and everybody started to want to utilize their smartphones and not so much what work provided.
Yeah, I mean, there was a pretty good period of time where it was full device management still, and whether it was bring your own or work, it was a full managed. And then as the need kind of developed, there were some more capabilities to have limited enrollment where you could just get email without having to have your device fully managed by a provider like AirWatch that your company was using. So it was interesting. It
Interesting.
was very
Yeah.
trust driven, right? The idea of trusting what someone
Yeah.
can do with full device capabilities on
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've clicked around in CyberArk identity a little bit, and I have come across some mobile device management aspects of identity. So maybe on the next Ask Joe Anything, we can have you back to dive into identities. No, I'm kidding.
absolutely not.
He's like, that's the past. I've forgotten
Yeah.
more about that
I like
than
looking in the future, not in the
yeah,
past.
which
Yeah,
is cloud security, and that's why we're here
right.
today, right?
Nicely
So
done. Yeah.
excellent. Let's talk about some events and stuff like that that we've got coming up. Let's start with CyberArk Impact that is scheduled for Nash Vegas this year. We're going to Nashville. This is the first time Impact is going to be in Nashville. I think maybe I've been in Nashville for less than 24 hours in my entire life. Like, I dropped in for something with, I feel like it was Chad Frumkin in Nashville. And it was like, I flew in the morning, I flew out that night, didn't really get to experience all that is, Nash Vegas.
Right.
Have you been to Nashville before? I assume so. You were a Southeast guy for a while there. So I imagine you flew in
Yeah.
and out a couple
Yeah, it's
times.
like, 3.5 hours or so from Atlanta. I've taken a couple weekend trips there and
Oh, yeah.
gone through the honky tonks and seen the crazy bachelorette parties that go through there. So I definitely have seen the Vegas part of Nash Vegas. It's a fun
Yeah.
time.
I wonder, let's see, they added more information since the last time we checked out this page.
I like the snazzy
Um,
video that they have playing behind the
I
scenes
know,
there.
yeah, that's what so they have it here, like in the header, and then even down further, it used to just bump down to this video here, the top moments from last year. So they kind of used the video in two places, which I thought was great too. I really like the animation. It
Yeah.
keeps it from being boring looking, but they've added event pricing in now because, people are starting to purchase their event access and stuff. There's a register now button that wasn't there when we were doing Ask Joe Anything with Jared last month. And they have hotels too. So it's going to be at the JW Marriott in Nashville. Do you happen to know where that is in Nashville? 8th Avenue in Nashville? Is that like
Yeah,
in
I
the
don't
heart
know.
of it? No,
Never
I don't
heard
know
of
either.
it. I
But
don't
they
know the
have
streets.
it,
Yeah,
it's near like 6 other hotels, so I'm imagining it's somewhere in the thick of things for the most part. So
which one do you think they'll stick us in?
well, I hope it's this one, honestly, but knowing that, which one is like it can't be too far away.
That's right. Yeah.
I would probably, well, no, because so I don't. That's a good question. They're all like this is legit, like Marriott. We know that one, right? Hyatt
Yep.
Place is that's Hyatt, but then these are boutiques, right? Aren't they? Home Two Suites and One Hotel and True by Hilton. Those are like boutique.
Yeah, they're cool and hip brands.
Yeah.
Um, I think.
I've never heard of Cambria. Embassy Suites, obviously, I have. But there's a nice collection. I assume they're all within, the general location of each other. These two are next to each other. These two are next to each other. So I would probably just wait for discounted pricing that's coming soon before I booked my hotel. I did go through the registration process though, because we have call for papers that got extended. It was actually meant to be end on Tuesday of this week, but they say that they say the deadline is through the 7th. I actually heard internally that it's through the 8th. So that's what I'm going with. I doubt that they will say, hey, you got your call for paper in a day late. Like, we're not going to accept it if you get it in by the end of the week.
As long as it's a good one. Yeah.
But the cool thing this year, I think, is that it's the same process for whether you're an employee or a customer or a partner and you want to submit a call for papers to speak at Impact. So if you're watching this right now, I've got a ticker on the bottom that's scrolling with a short link that will take you directly to what I'm seeing. Now, what I experienced when I tried to browse to this for the first time was I needed to create an account for Impact registration. So I did that, and it tried to get me to like purchase my tickets and my airfare or like, you know, hotel and everything like right away. So I canceled out at that point because I noticed I was logged in, and I clicked this big Impact website button that's always there, and then came back to this page and it loaded right up for me. So it seems like that's the trick to getting access through logging in without actually having to complete the registration for the event, so that you can at least see if your papers get accepted before you start, like, you know, shelling out money for event tickets and things like that. But you can submit the proposal here for the call for papers, and you know, we'll go through. It looks like the entire month of March, and we'll you know, review them, get things aligned, and you know, reach out to you and stuff like that, let you know that it was accepted, and then review the content throughout April leading up to May for Impact. Did you submit any papers? Any talks? Anything you want to give us like a little inside info on?
Yes, submitted a couple different ones. So one primarily focused on cloud security. No surprise there.
Yeah.
Really kind of I think the title I was trying I should have brought it up beforehand, but I came up with some sort of snazzy title, something like cloud security is yesterday's problem, how to solve that problem, and your future problems moving forward with automation, something of that sort, right? And
Yeah.
the idea there is you already have a problem in the cloud with over permissioned identities and access that is just kind of all over the place.
Mhm.
And CyberArk can, of course, help you immediately with that, but just addressing the existing issue is half the battle, right? How can you work in automation into the implementation process, so as you move forward, you're not just recreating the same problem you just solved? How can you use infrastructure as code to keep the environment secure moving forward, and might make your life easier? So that's the idea for that particular one. Just really focused on the cloud management layer. And then a big piece, and I think we'll talk a little bit about it today, is not just cloud consoles and the management layer, but workloads that are running in the cloud as well, and how that really extends from the CyberArk privilege access management that a lot of you are aware of today, how that conversation is very much the same, and just as an extension when you start talking about workloads that you've lifted and shifted, or even our true dynamic ephemeral systems. So that's another session as well that I've proposed.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm glad you highlighted Mr. Markert's comment. Now you guys know where to find me. I'll be out by the airport.
Yeah, he'll be the courtyard by the airport. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for dropping by, dude.
What a great YouTube headshot.
I know. It is. Let's put it back up. Look at this. I guarantee you. You remember that? I think it was 2 years ago. There was an Impact at. It was in Boston, I think, and they had the photographer set up taking head. This is that headshot. Like, Adam showed up. He was like, "There's going to be a photographer. Let me shine my head," and he shows up, gets his picture taken. But I mean,
I was actually there while he was having this picture taken. Pretty sure.
So mine, I got my picture taken there too, but I wasn't prepared at all. So this picture is actually, I changed the background. It's not gray anymore, but that was taken by the same photographer. Only I didn't know he was gonna be there. I didn't know what he was doing there. And
Yeah.
somebody's like, "Just go get a picture for, like, things or whatever." And I was like, "But I got the same shirt on I'm wearing right now, my Stolen Secrets shirt. It's just a t-shirt." They're like, "Yeah, but you're DevOps." And I'm like, "Okay." It works. So I've been using it, but,
It is always
Adam.
funny when you end up showing a picture and you happen to be wearing that same shirt that was in the picture. Like, perfect timing.
I usually, well, I always wear a CyberArk shirt when I do these things, but I was putting it on and I'm thinking to myself as I'm putting it, like, this is in my headshot. I don't know if I should probably retire this shirt now, but whatever. It's just it's just a live stream. It's not anything fancy. Come on.
Yeah.
So
I think I
anyway,
threw a collar shirt last time, and then I realized I was too fancy, so I was like, "Let
yeah,
me
no.
dress down. Let's go around."
Yeah, definitely. So call for papers. Good. You got papers. Are you guys going to be doing, you know how, like, we say it's the 20th through the 22nd, but in all actuality, like, the actual impact event is going to be the 21st and the 22nd, and the 20th is typically a Monday, and it's reserved for training for people who attend. Do you
Yeah.
guys have anything cloud security related that's going to be available there that you're aware of, or is that TBD?
I think we're working on workshops that could be part of that. So everything is still waiting for approval. But one of the things that we've been talking about is a hands-on lab for seeing how you can do the secure cloud access for your cloud environments. So
Okay,
hands-on experience with what zero standing privilege actually means, and how
cool.
it is fairly easy to get going compared to a lot of the other things out there.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of to come, later with that, for sure. I know it's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around as well too, and you helped me a lot with that. So I'll have questions when we get there.
Are you
Um,
doing any workshops?
so I don't know about work. Nobody's approached me about any workshops. I know that DevSecOps does have some around. I think Secrets Hub is going to be one. Um, I imagine Conjure Cloud would be one too. We're probably going to stick with our SaaS services just because they're so new and stuff for this. Um, but yeah, so there'll be like normal trainings and stuff that
Yeah.
people can do for our talks. We've got a couple that we've submitted like as a team, but not really assigned any speakers to. I'm doing something completely separate where I submitted a like a hopes and dreams kind of call for paper, I guess you could say, where we would basically do Ask Joe Anything live at Impact, have a panel of past guests that would be on stage, right? And so we would do essentially our first hour like this with the panel, doing Q&A with the panel about their different areas of expertise. It would be each of the SMEs and stuff from the different areas, like 5 or so. And then we would go into the Q&A section, and it would be a live Q&A with the audience, but also with the live chat as well, asking questions. And we could present it to the live audience. I can have cameras pointing everywhere and stuff to keep the live stream really involved in stuff. I think that would be a lot of fun to do at Impact. Um, and I was, I had somebody this morning actually come to me because I've been kind of trying to figure out how I could do it in the guise of a breakout session, but our breakout sessions are really only 30 minutes a piece. And this is something where I'd want like 30 minutes or 45 minutes for the panel and then like 30 minutes for the Q&A. So it kind of end up being two breakout sessions. And James Creamer, actually, who I asked to be one of the panelists on it from a strategy perspective, he was like, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if you did this in the Discovery Center as like in that vendor speaking area during a happy hour?" Our happy hours are usually like an hour and a half to 2 hours long, right? That would align with what I'm trying to do. It'd be the perfect place for it because I'm not trying to be all corporate with it. Like, we're trying to have fun, help out the customers,
Yeah.
have a good time, and it's like the perfect place for it. So there's some conversations happening internally. uh haven't received any word as to whether it's going to go anywhere or not. um I am planning for it to happen, right? And if it doesn't happen, then whatever. I've got a nice template to try again next year and improve upon it and see if I can't do it again. And it'll just basically turn into the fog machine where I ask for a fog machine for my breakout session every year and I get denied. I will ask for a panel and a live Ask Joe Anything, and but hopefully not get denied because I've been dealing with the event coordinators and everybody's so nice, and also like listening, right? Which is really all like listen to my ideas. If they're crap, then let me know and we'll move on with life. But if it sounds interesting and fun and you want to kind of run with it,
I think it's
let me
worth
know.
saying. You told me earlier, but the streak you have going with the fog machine request is really
8 years running of requesting a fog machine. So, Acer One did bring up a good point that I was also thinking about when it came up about the happy hour. And it is really noisy for something like that to go on. And I don't, so the unfortunate part, I'm going to have to lean on some actual attendees of Impact or people who didn't have to work on a booth. But typically, when these events are going on, you and I, Mike, right? At least we're stuck on a booth. Like we're not experiencing what everyone else is experiencing. So we're just kind of focused in on our neck of the woods. And I don't know, like, were there vendor things happening during the happy hour last year? I could have swore there were, but I don't know, like, if you could hear them or if they were hard to hear their presentations or what the experience was like that. So I'd be interested to
I feel
hear
like we
from you.
had a customer presentation either last year or the year before in one of the corners. Yeah, it sounds like Acer One saying here that there was a speaker. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I remember as well.
Yeah.
I think I walked by it and saw that there was a crowd, and then had to go do whatever I was tasked to do.
Yeah.
But
We'll
maybe
we'll
it's
figure it out. Like I just gave them the idea. They can put me in lunch in front of everybody. I don't care. Like we're gonna have fun. We're gonna draw a crowd. We're gonna dish out some good expertise and in a fun way and make it interactive as possible. And that's that. Maybe this year we're in the corner of the back of the hall with only one breakout on it, and then next year maybe we're moving up a little bit, and so I definitely just want to feel the waters, right, and see
Yep,
if it's something that could grow a pair of legs and become an impact tradition. That would be
love
my
it.
hopes and dreams. So enough of Impact. Let's move on. I've got a couple events that I want to talk about. I know, Mike, you've got a couple events that you want to talk about as well. I do want to touch on these identity security clinics that are happening. This one in particular is a luncheon uh, in New York at Del Frisco's. If you happen to live in New York, you can attend this on March 14th. I know it's short notice, a week notice. It'll be from 12 to 2:30 p.m. If you're in the area, in the New York area, by Del Frisco's Double Eagle, reach out to your account executive and ask them, or your customer success representative, ask them about this, and they'll be able to hook you up with this form. And if you are not in New York, but do think you would like to attend an identity security clinic that involves all of these awesome check marks here, there is one for all regions remotely that is going to be available on Thursday, March 28th. So if you're not in New York and you'd like to attend it remotely, covering basically the same things as that New York one, you can reach out to your account executive, your customer success manager, and ask them for the remote identity security clinic link to get access to that. And then finally, before we get into your stuff, Mike,
Yep.
I happen to find the official cybersecurity summit is happening in Chicago on March 20th. That's coming up here soon. And one of the speakers at this event happens to be our very own Jed Knopf. So I figured I'd throw him a bone and pimp him out a little bit on Ask Joe Anything and let everybody know that Jed's going to be out there holding it down for CyberArk. I'm sure there'll be a little table out there that he'll be on, but more importantly, he'll be speaking and dropping some knowledge. And if you've never heard Jed speak before, he's very knowledgeable. He's a solutions architect at CyberArk, and what that means is he is extremely well versed in the identity security platform as a whole. He is not a subject matter expert of cloud security, DevSecOps, or one particular aspect of our platform. He is an expert in everything. That is what a solutions architect does. They architect solutions across all of the services our platform can provide. So I'm sure he'll be talking about some amazing stuff there. Unfortunately, I don't know what his talk is on, just that he's there. And I love the guy. And so, go check him out if you live in the Chicago area. The official Cybersecurity Summit on March 20th. Now, Mike, it's your turn, starting with another identity security clinic. Look at that. Let me go ahead and pull these banners off here so we're not getting mixed up.
It's just a continuation to the one that you were talking about in New York. So,
okay.
So I'll be speaking at this one on the 19th in Denver at the Del Frisco's there. And then there's also one happening a couple days later in Seattle that my colleague Prashant will be speaking at.
Awesome. Cool. So 2 other identity, and these are going to be focused though on cloud security, right? The others seemed like they were more like actual identity specific. But yeah, okay. Yeah,
these will be focused cloud security, but not just from cloud only or cloud native, covering both the IT administrator lift and shift experience, but also from a cloud native, digital native business perspective. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So both of those 2, reach out to account executives, customer success. All of these are not like things that you can just go and browse a website to see the events and stuff. Unfortunately, you need to get these directly from your sales team at CyberArk. So with that,
it's easier to find. I was even having a hard time finding them. It would be nice if it was.
So, what I do is, and only employees can do this. So if you're watching this video, this is just for Mike. But I go to CyberArk Connect in our corporate identity, and then I go to the events page from there, and they have all of the different marketing events that are kind of just like queued up there. Anytime that they're created, they're added there. So I go and sift through there and pick out ones. There's definitely a lot more than what I talked about coming up. It's just that March 28th is going to be the next Ask Joe Anything. And so we'll talk about them then, right? There's no more between now and then. So, but focusing on today's Ask Joe Anything on JiT and secure cloud access, I want to talk to you specifically, Mike, about secure cloud access. So we met about actually it's over a year ago now. I know that much. And at the time we had just kind of touched on dynamic privileged access, and it was great, right? We had a great talk, great discussion about it. SCA, I think, was still a little new, and our real focus was dynamic privileged access. And more to the point, it was looking at utilizing just-in-time provisioned access to Windows and to Linux, and that was it, right? Like, and this was provisioning the access. Like there was no way that we could utilize any vaulted credentials, anything like that. A lot of things have changed since we had that. So we can kind of use this as a refresher of some of the new features that I know DPA or Dynamic Privileged Access has come out with recently, but really want to focus on secure cloud access. One, because, well, guess what? I get to finally work with it this year. So I get to play with it more. And so, I'm being a little selfish there, wanting to talk about it more, but also, the more that I use it and the more that I learn about what it does, the more sense it makes that, like, why doesn't everybody just use this already? And so I want to really start with looking at how a lot of people who are going to be watching this today are probably accessing like their management consoles and things like that, and then take a look at how that can change and how we can improve upon that workflow, utilizing some solutions that you can provide and you can set up, And then we can also talk about some of the benefits that that brings on from a security perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point, right? It's why isn't it already being used is a fun way of putting that for sure. And understanding, like, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and there's always new attack vectors that come into play, and so this is really highlighted to a lot of people, a really open attack path that is available in a lot of situations, and we have a really cool way of addressing that, limiting lateral movement, and really nullifying that particular method. So I don't know what you had in mind. Did you have any particular questions? Did you want me to really give the pitch here? How should we start things off?
Yeah, so let's focus on I'm trying to think here of, you know, when customers come to you, like in the past year and a half that you've been doing this, what cloud service provider are you seeing them trying to secure the most on average?
Yeah, all of them, of course. But the two biggest are going to be AWS and Azure, and I definitely think they're very close to each other.
Mhm.
Customers always almost very much heavily in one over the other. There's going to be like an 80-15, and then five
Right.
of the third one is what we're seeing. It's not just one. But it's a flip of the coin a lot of times on whether they're going to be AWS heavy or Azure heavy. I think I would put AWS as the slight leader, especially in the US market.
Yeah.
But it's probably flipped. If we're
Okay.
talking about EMEA, UK, you're going to see Azure as being the primary focus.
So it supports the major cloud service providers. So
Yep.
AWS, Azure, GCP. From AWS's perspective, does it support does it just support, like, is it using like IAM role assumption or something like that and using the IAM stuff, or is
Right.
there other support for it as well?
Yeah. So from kind of the AWS perspective, right, is there's the typical method that comes with federation, which is going to be role assumption. So using IAM roles, and we absolutely support that methodology as well. Now that AWS is starting to focus and make their best practice much more around AWS Identity Center, they formerly called it AWS SSO. We're also supporting that methodology. So that's using permission sets, and kind of changes the AWS scenario a little bit to mimic much more active Azure Active Directory, in the sense that there's going to be a directory within AWS at this point that you're kind of managing and manipulating.
Yes.
And we're definitely seeing, when we start looking at, okay, from the AWS customers, what's the methodology that they're using? It's for sure, probably a 7 out of 10
Mhm.
that they're going to be utilizing Identity Center, or they're looking to start utilizing Identity Center because AWS is pushing it as their suggested methodology for managing identities.
Is there any particular reason behind that? Is it simply because of the permission set model that they've implemented in Identity Center?
Yeah, it's very much the fact that you can utilize a directory management layer from the management account that will be able to handle permissions down. So rather than having to have roles and the appropriate configuration from an IDP perspective at different AWS accounts within your organization and trying to control permissions that way, you
Mhm.
now have a centralized account within Identity Center, where you're managing those users and the permissions via permission sets that you
Okay.
can then easily distribute out to your AWS organization. So from a management perspective, that's the reason they're going with it. It's just much more robust in what you're able to do, and how you can do things like least privilege, and make sure you have a security mindset when you are doing your identity management in AWS.
And so I'd imagine if we were to pick on CyberArk identity for a minute and use the cloud directory within identity as like where we're creating our human identities. So our users are there.
Yep.
So we would integrate. CyberArk identity with AWS Identity Center. And then based on the user's roles that they're members of in identity, that will basically determine what access they have when they log into Identity Center. Like they'll get this permission set because they're in this particular role. They'll get this permission set because they're in this role, or they'll get, this other permission set because they're in another role. And so that's kind of how it would work. Like they get all of these permissions applied as they're coming in based on the roles from identity that they're a member of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good visualization, but I would actually even we could start from an opposite direction when we start thinking about it and how cool what we're doing is without
Yeah.
being too salesy by saying a cool thing that we're doing. But we're actually removing the need for any static assignments or group memberships to those permission sets, and the same can go across if we're talking Azure or GCP here as well. So don't want anyone to just ignore me because they're only doing something for AWS and we're Azure. So it's almost a like for like no matter what we're talking about here. But the beauty is there's no static mapping that needs to happen. So even if we haven't given Joe Garcia any roles within CyberArk identity in that scenario you gave me, Joe has the ability to request access
Mhm.
to a particular permission set and account within AWS, and based on some sort of workflow. And it could be automatic approval because you're a member of an AD or an Azure AD group or a federated group that we're going to give this permission to when they need it, or whether it's through a workflow via chat ops like
Mhm.
Slack or Teams or ServiceNow, whatever ITSM you want to use, that a human approves it. You're going to be able to get that access just in time
Mhm.
on top of the zero staining privilege. And so that's the big benefit there is rather than having to map everything in AWS and the permissions always are there,
Mhm.
so that if somebody who shouldn't have your credentials can now log in to AWS with your credentials,
Right.
in that previous scenario, it's just everything is there waiting for them
I
to,
see.
to have it. And now there's nothing there
So,
until
okay,
they have the right workflow in place
I gotcha.
for that access.
So basically, like the three roles that are applied to my user that I was saying I would log into Identity Center and get those permission sets. What you're telling me you do is you take those three roles and you allow me to request access to them, but I'm not getting all three roles at once. I am choosing the role that I want and only getting those permissions. So let's
Exactly.
say, God forbid, I am compromised. If somebody gets access to my session for whatever reason, maybe they stole a cookie or something like that, they're not getting access to all three roles. They're getting access to the one that I am currently allowed to access.
Yep.
So we're
So
reducing the risk of what a potential, malicious actor could get access to by not having those three roles always available and applied to me as a user. Can you show me
full free
what this
privilege.
kind of looks like
Yeah.
in our let's take a look at it because this is interesting. I think getting the visuals along with the explanation that we just got may cause some things to click. Um
Yeah, and I mean, if we dig into it as I get my screen shared, right,
yeah, no worries.
is first when we talk about the zero staining privilege concept, right? Of course, we love the idea of really getting you to zero staining privilege where nothing is going to be assigned, but we'll find that that isn't typically the case of what can happen. And what do I mean by that? A lot of how our customers are working today is very similar to what you should now be seeing on the screen here, right? Is they come directly to AWS. This is the Identity Center login page. So they've already logged in through their identity provider and they have access to this initial Identity Center page. You can see here that I've been given read-only access at this particular account within our organization. And so it's read-only access. And so the assumption here is we're going to allow our developers to work with the read-only access as they need to without having any additional privilege controls in front of that. Now, we'll preface that with saying we do think that read-only access can be used for lateral movement and investigation, and you can still find things, right? You could go and
Right.
find metadata and things like
Yeah.
that with read-only. So our best practice would be getting to a point where maybe even that's not available. But you can't always, you have to weigh the pros and cons of certain things. So this would be the scenario, but a lot of customers before our solution is implemented is this will end up being a long list of AWS accounts and permissions like administrator access, power user access, even whatever the custom permission sets or roles that are part of your organization.
So Identity Center is kind of akin to an organization in Azure where it's going to encapsulate many different accounts. So even though we're seeing 2 roles for one account here, if you had access to like 15 accounts, 3 accounts per, or sorry, 3 IAM user roles. I don't know. What do we, what do
Permission
we,
sets. Yeah.
permission set? Okay.
Yeah.
So 3, that adds up, and that's a lot of scrolling. And even, you know, if we look here, like the only thing I have outside of that friendly name is an account number that I have no idea to how to delineate between things based off of that. So,
Right.
very
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
that's a fair point. Even from usability, right? Removing the security conversation out of the equation, just from the usability of having to scroll through a
Yeah.
long of things, especially if you're not using them regularly, right? Because there's a scenario that comes into play here. You know, you asked me about what I did before CyberArk, and I mentioned that you know, firewalls and servers and stuff like that. But the old firewall thing where it's easier to do an allow all as opposed
Yeah.
to a deny all and then allowing just what you need. It's quicker to just get it set up with an allow all, right? And so we know that a developer, an SRE, is going to need to end up doing something one day to fight a firefight on a Saturday when someone's not available to approve a ticket. And so we're going to go ahead and just give, well, Jared in the chat said don't give Joe permission. So we give Jared permission to firefight on Saturday, and he only needs it once out of a year, but every day for the year, it's available to him to have full admin access just in case he needs it. And that's a pretty big issue when you think about it as well. So incident level elevation is very important here. So let's look at the flip side of how what we're doing here helps solve this problem as well and simplifies things. So what we'll see here is the CyberArk identity security platform that you mentioned, Joe. This is the user portal. It's going to look like an SSO IDP. So that's exactly what it is. You do SaaS applications for both SAML, username and password, workforce password management. Probably heard all those things with Jared Brodsky in the previous session. So I won't harp on all of that today, but it's great stuff. But down here, you'll notice I have my icons for the cloud service providers. And just like we mentioned, both flavors of AWS, GCP, and Azure all being supported. And when I come through for Identity Center, if I needed something more than that read-only permission that I showed you I have directly, first, we are going to be able to have the audit privilege control enforced here with session protections for our browser access. But now within CyberArk, we have the permissions that I'm allowed to elevate to on a day-to-day basis. And this is that determination of what does Mike or Mike's team of developers need access to during normal business hours. So Monday through Friday, during 8 to 5, because I'm lucky and it's only during normal business hours I work, which I know is never the case for anyone. But I have power user access here that I can elevate to on top of the read-only access, because that's what I need for my day-to-day workflow. And so now when I go ahead and click connect, we're going to see that same page in a moment that I had a moment ago. But in addition to the read-only access, I'm now going to have the power user access permission set apply. And as it's spinning, 2 things are happening. Is we're sending APIs over to AWS saying add this permission set to Mike's user. And then we redirect. And so here we can see at that AWS account, now I have the power user.
Nice.
Right? This is that zero staining privilege just in time. Is I didn't have it, I got it, and within the if I show in a moment, I'll show what that policy looked like again. Is it's configurable 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, whenever that expires, I'm going to have that permission taken away again back to ZSP.
So if
And
you're clicking around, like getting ready to launch an EC2 instance, you go to click launch, but this expiration has occurred. It won't. It'll just basically act like as if you were signed out of SSO. I'd imagine, right? Same concept, basically,
yeah,
right?
yeah. If the permissions have been removed
Yeah.
and it's outside of that window, then we're going to see that they're not going to be able to complete that task because AWS is going to say you no longer have that entitlement.
So we do have a question from Acer1 in chat, asking if the customer needs to know what roles and permissions are required, and if I guess a second question, uh, are you seeing developers being given unfettered access prior to, right, security teams or cloud architects coming to us and wanting to come up with a solution to secure the access to the management console? Do developers really need that sort of level of access? Like what have you heard about in your travelings?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I mean, it's obviously a spectrum, right? Depending on I hate to use the maturity to then pick on somebody who's not at the state they want to be, but the maturity of the customer in their cloud journey and whether they've been able to understand the roles and the accompanying permissions enough to say the developers only need A, B, and C during these windows of times.
Yeah.
What we are seeing in a lot of cases is the need for that elevated model where we're going to go ahead and let our developers have read-only access, basically 24/7. We're
Mhm.
not going to take that away from them, so that they can get the access that they need from that read-only perspective. But if they need to do anything beyond that, we're going to need them to either elevate using the method I just showed you or our request process that could be triggered based off of a ITSM ticket that is open, some sort of incident that's already happening, or it needs to go for a human approval via chat ops or the ticket you actually get approved
Yeah.
when you request that access. So it's a full spectrum of, yes, people are just completely like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to take those permissions away. I think the other side to it is a lot of times the security team has tried to solve it through privilege access management with privilege session manager, and I work for CyberArk, and obviously privilege session manager has its importance and provides session management capabilities that are critical. But when we start thinking about the access to the management layer of the cloud or the CLI, which we haven't even talked about here, but what we've done here is the same for the CLI. Is we'll elevate this user's permissions so he can work natively within the CLI as well. Trying to steer that method through the privilege session manager to get audit and compliance and control over shared credentials is very difficult for developers. So this is where this model amplifies the ability for the security team to get things within their control as well.
Well, the other day we were kind of playing around on a call, just the two of us. Well, I mean, other people were there, but when I'm talking to you, I'm just so fixated on just you and I. But no, but we were, and I was like, hey, click that Cloud Shell link there, and let's open up Cloud Shell and see how SCA handles that. And not only SCA, but the session recording that it provides when you connect through SCA to now, the AWS management console. And so honestly, nothing wrong with utilizing the CLI this way now, and you're not really leaving that secure bubble wrap of visibility and isolation that SCA provides through its step recording, the session protection, everything like that you highlighted there. So great. But it was when we were testing it, I think it's important to note that, like, we were able to see in that step recording not only what we were sending, but the responses we were getting back from the Cloud Shell in this hybrid mode between the UI and the CLI. So, maybe you don't want to walk away and utilize the AWS CLI outside of the purview of SCA and you don't want to necessarily use PSM to connect to the AWS CLI, well, now you've got another option too that is sufficient as well. Unless you found some more information since the last time we talked that you want to talk about it or anything, or nope,
No. I mean, I think
pretty much it.
that's right. So whether you want to come and use the cloud shell within the console, right, or if your CLI of choice is the AWS CLI, right, you've elevated, you have the access to the permission set, and then it's working natively with the AWS CLI as you normally would. So if you're a Mac guy and you're working off terminal, or want to go to PowerShell,
Yeah.
you're going to just grab your credentials, or you use the SSO process through AWS CLI, and you're just going to work natively as you normally would. So from
Yeah.
a developer slash user experience, right? I'm not forcing them to go out of their typical flow, with the
Right.
exception of elevating to get the permissions they need. I'm not
Yeah.
sending them to some other proxy server to
Yeah.
work off of a virtualized experience. They're working within their web browser or within their CLI once they've elevated their permissions
Yeah.
appropriately.
Yeah. This would be really good for a lot of those local tools that utilize the AWS CLI as a means of communicating with AWS. So I use something called COPS to deploy and maintain Kubernetes in AWS on EC2. And that utilizes the AWS CLI in order to interact and stand up a lot of stuff. So I wouldn't be able to necessarily use the Cloud Shell in the management console. I would use that more for like one-off commands that I'm just trying to get quick reference of or something like that. But I could see this coming into play for those situations where I need cops to deploy into AWS, or I don't know what, I'm developing a serverless function for Lambda and I need to test it on my endpoint. And it's going to eventually, once it's successfully tested, deploy using the AWS CLI into my environment. Things like that, right? Third party things that interact with the CLI. I think this would be good for. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm not too, I know this is AWS first and foremost. That's showing this is not like us doing this, but I hate, I know there's a session token involved here that's going to set a time to live on the key ID, the access key, the sessions it can create, and things like that. I just hate really having it on my local file system in plain text for any amount of time. And so anything I can do to avoid that is what I try to do. But if I've got it for a short time frame, I only need 30 minutes to spin up cops and stuff, then maybe it's an acceptable risk at that point. I just don't. I
It's
don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's the controls, it's that balance, right? Is
Yeah.
is what are your developers, your end users, whoever the persona is, what do they need to get their job done,
Yeah.
and where can that push and pull take you to, and if they need to do something that's going to require them to use their file system to get that access, and they need to work natively, then let's put controls around the tokens, right? So when they inevitably just leave it on their file system, 4 hours later, or whatever you define, it's expired. So you're mitigating the risk as much as possible, so that someone's not getting on that machine and stealing that credential 3 days later. It's expired. It's no
Right.
good.
Yeah. Which is, I honestly, I don't think I've ever. No, yeah, I have. I was trying to think if I ever used a session token with the CLI. Um, I've used IAM role assumption with the CLI before, which was pretty interesting. Um, but I don't think I ever added any like a session token to the credentials or anything like this. Like this is asking us to do. So, uh, you know, I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't know as much as I probably should with how it could be abused, if it could be abused or anything like that. But
Yeah, we hear a pretty good amount of customers saying, they don't want ClickOps, right? They don't want to go
yeah,
into the console, or even use that cloud shell that you have within the console. They're just going to work natively
right.
from their system, and this helps them out.
Yeah, I've tried that before, and from my experience, I've always needed to reference some sort of ID from the user interface anyways. So having the two together to where I can copy from the user interface and then paste in the Cloud Shell has just always seemed very intuitive to me. But I gotta imagine that, little me, right? Little Joe G in his little Tampa home, right? Spinning up Kubernetes clusters and spinning up, all these containers and stuff is not anything like a huge corporation doing the same thing, right? I assume there will be automation involved, right? They're not going to use cops manually to deploy a Kubernetes cluster. They will probably use something like managed cloud service, or they're going to use, something like OpenShift, or something more enterprise worthy, I'd imagine. So
Yeah.
uh, it it's definitely a lot of learning still for me to do, just from because I am this just actually fell into my wheelhouse at the beginning of this year. So I'm only a couple months into really trying to wrap my head around it. Um, and
Yeah, I mean, the next piece in what you're talking about when we start talking enterprises is a lot of the enterprises are going to say, you know, we're not even allowing console access to our production environments at this point, right? Those are all
oh
infrastructure as
wow.
code, and if it's GitOps at that point, right? If,
Mhm,
if we need to push something out, it's happening from via GitOps. It's not happening from the console. Now, I think the two pieces there become, well, what about incidents, right? If you do need to get troubleshooting access and elevate for a ticket and something goes down,
mhm.
the second scenario is just making sure any of the initial privileges are built into your automation and your infrastructure as code, as I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So once you get things initially configured for your current state, what happens when Adam Marker requests a new AWS account to start working on a new application that's going to be developed, and your automation needs to kick off to create that new account, and then and then needs to be able to grant the appropriate level of permission rather than defaulting to that allow all, or whatever that could be. So building secure cloud access into that automation process
Mhm.
via Terraform or Ansible, as I know what you would
Yeah,
say is the best practice there, is a big piece of things as well.
that's cool. Let's take a look at a couple questions here. Unless we get more people coming in the second hour and asking questions in chat, I think that the Q&A portion of today can be handled through comments when you watch on demand, because that's probably how most of you are going to watch today's live stream. If you do have questions, still please ask them in chat and I'll bring them up. But I'd like to continue with what we're talking about and looking at here, Mike, because I am definitely learning a lot, and hopefully, we can answer some of these other questions. For example, are you seeing more companies completing least privilege assessments for cloud? I think that that might even be step one for getting involved in our solution that's available, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard yes, absolutely. We're starting to see, we're not starting. It's very much picked up in the sense that uh, cloud security has apparently, in the joking sense, suddenly just appeared in our privilege access management teams as well as identity access management teams. It's now falling under their umbrella, whether it's organizational shifts within companies, right, that have now kind of said, hey, there's a lot of work happening in cloud environments, and we need that to fall under the security and the PAM umbrella. And so we're having many organizations coming to us saying we need to have we need assistance. How can you help us with understanding what we have out there and how to secure what we have out there? And that's where the assessments are coming into play as well.
And then as far as the process that we were just talking about, the question is if it's a more of a first step to quickly mitigate and provide visibility, or I think that there's more answers than just one to this. I think it could be a good first step, but it could also become a mature program as you branch out into. And I think the point that we didn't really touch on because we focused on AWS is multi-cloud scenarios is where it really comes in to be extremely magical. But I'll let you kind of explain that.
Yeah, we refer to this kind of our catchy phrase here, right? Is stop the bleeding. So knowing that there's a lot of, and we'll use that word, unfettered access happening into the cloud environments today. Go ahead and put a process in place that says from this point forward, we're going to require the elevation to take process. We're not going to just grant the permissions moving forward because you need them. We're going to put this in play for any projects moving to the future. Then becomes the part of visibility and understanding what's already out there. We do have capabilities with one of our solutions that provide some of that insight. I mean, quite honestly, though, the visibility aspect of the cloud is just gigantic, right? And there's obviously other big players out there, Wiz and of the sorts that just have it across the board, and that's what they're focused on. And so we even have a partnership with Wiz for this capability of helping identify that those overprivileged identities and then working them into CyberArk identity security platform for the appropriate privilege control. So we're providing some insights and looking to figure out how we can expand our discovery and visibility, but we're also partnering with the biggest players out there for a lot of the organizations that have probably already purchased the Wiz or a Prisma.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually was not aware of an integration with Wiz. That is phenomenal. If that is something that we have.
It is official, so I shouldn't be getting in trouble by saying it.
Oh, great.
It's being designed, and so we do. We are anybody who listens in who is a Wiz customer and wants to be part of that conversation. You'll get CyberArk Wiz on the line together to talk through and hear what we're doing.
Nice.
So the integration isn't there yet officially, but the partnership is there officially.
That's cool. And then to just kind of wrap things up here, I'll share out my screen. So this is Cloud Entitlements Manager, right? And we've got it tied into, I think 5 or a lot. Look at this. Holy crap. 3 out of 3 AWS, 4 Azure, 18 out of 19 GCP. Look at us go.
GCP heavy.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm actually a part of that number. I found that Google Cloud is an interesting one to work with. But as you can see, right, from just this dashboard, I'm not really going to go too deep into it because I haven't really gone past this dashboard in quite a few years. Maybe Mike would be more comfortable with it, but I'm not. But you can see easily, right, just from the dashboard, how we're going to immediately scan any of the different accounts or subscriptions or directories that you provide us from, the different cloud services. And so that we're going to provide a report just from the get-go, whether you like it or not. And this is, I think this is Cloud Entitlements Manager is just really looking at the IAM specific users, their roles that are assigned, and whether there's like shadow admins or anything like that. Am I keep me honest here, Mike?
Yep. Yeah, okay. You're exactly right. It's the discovery component of the secure cloud access that we're talking about. So both are tied together in that sense, just a component of each other that'll give some high level discovery around the IAM users or Azure principal identities that have permissions or GCP identities that have permissions in those different, we call them workspaces. You see 26 workspaces at the top. That's our catch-all term across the multi-cloud environments.
Wow. Yeah, this is definitely a lot cooler than the last time I looked at it. So this is Cloud Entitlements Manager, right? And then there's the other aspect of it. You want to understand your IAM outlook, right? Permissions, users, what is over permissioned, what's not being utilized, things like that. But then there's the flip side too. There are secret stores within these cloud service providers that can hold secrets separate from CyberArk, in which case you would want to use something like Secrets Hub to tie into your different secret stores, whether it's AWS Secrets Manager or even Azure Key Vault, which should be this first one up here. Any of those secret stores will get scanned and pull in information about every secret in there, whether it's onboarded to CyberArk or not. And then from there, you can make a determination as to, oh, yeah, this one was actually synchronized from Secrets Hub. But then I've got another one here that, if I look at the tags, does not have that tag. So that is one that was added by whoever's using the Secrets Manager out of bounds. So you can do a least privilege, right, assessment for your cloud based on the question earlier, but you can also do the same for secrets too, utilizing the new features that are available in Secrets Hub today from an observability and visibility perspective here. So figured I'd add that one in there while I could, Mike. And,
yeah, important part of visibility for sure.
Kind of catch it from all angles. I definitely love working with Secrets Hub and Secure Cloud Access in tandem. It really, they kind of just seamlessly work together to keep everything as cloud native as possible. Now, I did say initially that I want to talk about dynamic privileged access, and I still do. We have the time, right? We don't really have many people asking questions in chat today as compared to some other times. So that gives us the ability to kind of take the reins any direction we want. And so there's a couple things in dynamic privileged access that have released recently that I have been waiting for a long time. Specifically, vaulted credentials and the ability to utilize vaulted credentials to make connections. And I'll tell you why, Mike. I'm going to tell you why.
Tell me why.
It's because I hate deploying Windows machines. And before, we had to provision the user that would be utilized to connect by dynamic privileged access to Windows endpoints. But I always just wanted a Linux EC2 to rule them all so that I could connect to Linux and Windows nodes through it. But that would require no provisioning, because it would, for provisioning, need to talk to Active Directory or something else. But now that I can just use vaulted credentials, I can now use my Linux-based connector for everything, and I'm happy about it. So I know that vaulted credentials is new. There's also new targets that DPA can connect to. I don't want to steal all of your thunder because I'm excited about one thing, but definitely tell us everything, because I think the last time we talked, it was just basically connecting to Linux, connecting to Windows, and then that was it.
Yeah, a lot of amazing things. I think the last time we talked, it was actually Linux and Windows just in AWS. Maybe a little bit in Azure. And now we have Linux and Windows and AWS, Azure, just Linux and GCP. So we're still missing the Windows, but not many people are going to GCP to run Microsoft. So that one's been pretty low on our list. So now we're supporting it across the three cloud providers, but we're also supporting on-prem systems as well. So for those hybrid customers that still have Windows and Linux systems on premise as well as in the cloud, you can utilize really calling it the dynamic privilege access component now for those connections. And the reason I call it component in the conversation now is it's a way to utilize session management without some of the pain points that you were mentioning, Joe, that come with Privileged Session Manager. Again, similar as what I said before with accessing the cloud through Privileged Session Manager, PSM is important, but there are certain things. One big one is RDP CAL licenses, right? Is if you're looking to utilize Privileged Session Manager, you have to buy CAL licenses as well, and a lot of times that comes as a surprise. Our new session management component, let's call it that way, removes the need for those CALs and just simplifies the load and the resources that are needed to run those connectors. It's also extending to databases now, which is super cool. So both for vaulted credentials like you were talking about, but also for ephemeral zero standing privilege access to databases like Postgres, like Microsoft SQL. We're able to connect you through your native tool of choice using a vaulted credential, but also creating an account on the fly for the particular period of time that you need it. So when we start talking about management and onboarding and things like that, the load is drastically reduced, right? Yes, you'll still want to onboard, manage, rotate the out of the box SA account for Microsoft SQL,
Right.
or the local admin, the Postgres default account that comes with that, the data, whatever database we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yes, manage that, rotate that. But when Joe needs to go do work on the database, you don't need to have X number of shared credentials available that can go through session management for it. We'll just allow Joe to get access with an ephemeral credential, and it gets deleted at the end of that session as well.
You know, that is phenomenal. You know, when I was a vault administrator back in my day, right? Back 10 years ago, yeah. I had the task of, Joe, figure out we called them fire IDs. I think some people call them fire calls, whatever you may call them. Basically, our developers would need a security exception process in place to be able to view production data to troubleshoot production issues. And so we'd always have a pool of read-only local database users that they could check out for 24 hours at a time through a request process that then they would use to connect to the database and do whatever work they needed to do. Now, downfalls to that, first and foremost, we were on version 7.2.11. So you can kiss PSM goodbye. That's not even like in existence yet. I think that came around version 8 and we're not there yet. so back in my day, for real, right? Like we are really back in my day. But that also meant that the second that the credential was checked out and we enforced exclusive access, and it was a one-time password that would change after 24 hours, we didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
We lost all visibility until 24 hours after that point, when we check it back in, right? Min validity expires, it checks back in, one-time password rotates it. I know they don't have access anymore, so whatever they were doing, they got to come back and check it out anyways. Not the best process. Definitely back then it was great, right? Compared to doing nothing. But by today's standards, it's not enough. And it sounds to me like this isn't even an issue that anybody needs to worry about anymore, because we used to have to, like, auditors would really take big, long looks at these accounts because they had access to production data. Developers were using them and they shouldn't be having this access. So we really need to look into how it's being used, when they're being used, what they're accessing, what they do have access to, etc. But with DPA, with dynamic privileged access to databases, this is kind of an afterthought, because not only are we creating just-in-time access to the databases, but we're also capturing all of the events that are occurring in that process and reporting on it. Am I correct?
Soon.
So, okay.
So the audit is not fully there yet with databases. So for SS8 sessions, we have a session audit for sure. For Windows, we're expecting that end of Q2 tentatively. I have to always put that tentatively. That's like our top priority now from a roadmap perspective. And then databases would come after that. So
cool.
We did go ahead and release the functionality without the full audit session recording yet, but that will come.
That's still really cool, because it'll solve the problem that a lot of people, are either using multiple products for, right? Whether it's CyberArk or not, like there's not one solution to rule them all when it comes to this process. But I imagine that not only from a database's perspective, but this would be access that developers would also need to their cloud resources that they could also utilize DPA for that time limited access, right?
Yep.
Does it have the same idea as secure cloud access where you can define the timeframes that it can be utilized without requesting access, and then out of band requires a request of access, so like an approval workflow?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, so for the ZSP, the zero standing privilege just in time access, it's going to be policy based. We'll call it attribute based access control. So, what systems and then who
I
and when
see.
are you able to access those? And is it Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? If it's
Mm,
outside of that, need to utilize a workflow request of some sort.
I see.
So the flow there would be more API driven with an ITSM tool of someone requests it, it'll create a policy via API. So a little bit of integration still needed from that perspective, but exactly right.
I mean, I don't. If you have ITSM and you're not integrating with it, like
Right.
you're doing too much, man. Like in my opinion,
Yep.
I love it. I was introduced to ServiceNow, as a customer of CyberArk, and it really opened up my eyes to how it can help out. It's really a centralized source of truth, similar to us. It's just dealing with all of the IT assets, right, that exist and resources and things like that. Whereas we're the privileged access and identity.
Yeah.
Um, so it's definitely my favorite piece to automate with, because it's just built in a way to where you can trigger these automated workflows and have an approval, like a manual approval step, that then once it's approved, it's off to the races. You're not doing anything but like right clicking and selecting approve on the task.
Right.
Um, but very cool that that there's still integrations with it from that perspective. So um I vaulted credentials. So I'm actually looking at the here, I'll share on my screen. Right now I'm looking at the DPA service in our identity security platform, and it starts with an introduction page, which is really cool. And you can select whether you want to use vaulted credentials or zero standing privileges. So do you want just in time? Do you want to use something that's already vaulted?
The connection guidance option on the left is a good one to show off if you want, Joe.
Yeah.
This is something that could be made available just for the end users in
Uh-huh.
your environment, so they wouldn't see any of the configuration stuff other than this. And here
Mhm.
they just build their connection string based off of what they're
I
looking
see.
to connect to. So it'll ask them, what are you looking to do? Is it ZSP? Is it using a vaulted cred? Where do you want to connect to? And then in this case, it
Interesting.
creates an RDP file. If it's SSH, it'll give you the connection string to drop into your SSH tool.
Yeah.
We can demo any of this as well if we want to.
Yeah, I want to take a look at it, because I haven't seen it through this connection guidance. I assume that it's just going, that RDP file is reusable, unlike PSM, correct? Like PSM, I think you get the RDP file, you have about maybe 10 seconds to connect with it, and then it expires. Otherwise, you get one-time use out of it, and then you need to request another one. Is this one reusable? I'd imagine if we're using zero standing privileges, it would be,
So it
right?
depends. So there's a setting that's essentially for MFA caching is the term I'll use for it. And so if you want to support
I see.
MFA caching,
Mhm.
it is actually only a one-time RDP file, and the reason being is you can authenticate into the console like you're seeing here, grab the RDP, any type of connection string as you
Anyways,
need to, and you're
here.
not going to have to re-authenticate when you launch the RDP file.
Mhm.
Versus if you want it to be a static RDP file, you'll just have to authenticate whenever you double click it, right? It's going to ask you to go
Here,
through your SSO, which is
I'll
totally fine. It's
I'll
just a
share your screen and you show us, and because I have no clue what I'm looking at, and I
feature.
probably should, Mike. So we're probably gonna have some internal talks after this.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I've been fully enabled on SCA. Dynamic privileged access is is happening now. So let me add you to the stage. There we go. So same idea, only in cyber world now, not Pineapple.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, we need to determine what we're looking to, what system we're looking to connect to, and how we want to do that. So if we select vaulted, you'll notice it is going to ask me for a little bit more information. What's the target user that I want to use? What is the vaulted credential that I have permission to versus the zero standing privileges? Is this going to connect me into this system and create an ephemeral account just for the particular session, and then it gets removed afterwards? So we can connect in here. I need to use my cheat sheet of reminding me what one of these servers are. So I'm gonna grab this guy right here. All right, so this is the server that I know I need to connect to, and we'll go ahead and download the RDP file. Okay. So that was auto launching behind the scenes. I don't want it to ask me again. And what we're going to see here, we're going to kick off the RDP file because I have the MFA caching in place. And I must have typed in the wrong server name because I didn't test this one beforehand, Joe. But what we should have seen happen, I know, is one, we saw that it passed any additional user authentication because I was authenticated via SSO MFA into the user portal where I grabbed the RDP file. So I had my basically a one-time session code in that file that I downloaded. So I was already authenticated, and then it's going to log me into the target system. Let's pivot for a second and see it on the Linux side. And so if I wanted to connect to an EC2 instance, I've already saved my connection string, so I know exactly where I need to connect to in this example. And because I know it's super small, I'll drop this into a notepad file and make it way bigger. Right, and the information here is really easy. And if I tell a story around this, I think it makes it really click. Is we think about the need to handle scale within a cloud environment. And so if you're doing have an application, you're only running one particular workload, one EC2, but you need it to have the automatic scale capability when sorry, words are escaping me all of a sudden. When it needs to scale out, you're not necessarily going to have those credentials vaulted every time, right? Because it's a new ephemeral system that is just spun up. And so here, all you need to know is the EC2 instance, the private IP address, for example, of the new system that just spun up. And everything else is the same. It's going to be the user's SSO identity. It's going to be the CyberArk SaaS solution URL. So that's all you need to know. You're not needing to manage and vault the credential in order to connect to it. So as soon as the system spins up, you have the instance ID or the IP address, and you're able to connect to it. And if we walk through that connection, we're going to see first it asks for my user's password.
So this is your identity user?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And I probably am typoing here, so I'm going to try this one more
Maybe,
time.
But I'm sure it'll give you another chance.
Yeah, exactly. Talking and typing is always fun. So this is my CyberArk identity, where we have CyberArk, SSO, and MFA. It can certainly be integrated with a third-party IDP as well. So if you have your own IDP that you're bringing as your SSO, for example, and sure enough, I typoed here. We'll tie in with that and just have to have the user redirect to complete against Azure SSO. And then once they've done that, we'll authenticate them and move on to the next step here. So let me do this one more time here.
Sure.
It's the fun of live demos. Is always gonna have some fun.
You know, I do things like this every once in a while where I'll set something up live and everybody hates it when it goes good and everybody loves it when it's a mess because they get to see like
it's real life.
But they get to see our thought process and how we troubleshoot and things like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not privy to. Like, how does a CyberArker actually troubleshoot? Because we try to hide a lot of that stuff from just the public and everything. But I find that, you know, if people are seeing how you're attacking something, they can easily take it and figure out their own way of doing it. but I
Yep.
see you got somewhere here. So it looks like we used the right information.
I got past my fat fingering. Yep. And so we see now I successfully got the MFA push. I accepted it, so I've been authenticated. Now I have two of those policies I was telling you about, Joe. So
Yeah.
one of the policies says that I would be able to connect in with my actual SSO identity on
Okay.
a Linux VM that's running our that has 80 bridging tied to it. And so if
Gotcha.
you have our it's soon to be released EPM identity bridging, which is like an 80 bridge, we'd be able to get this access via our own identity just in time, or I can specify the account that I want to connect in with that already resides on the Linux box. Now this EC2 admin, for example, no, I don't have the password for it. I don't have the SSH key for it. You could have no password or key tied to the credential. So it's truly just a landing account that's being used here. The ephemeral piece is we're signing a short-lived SSH certificate. So
Gotcha.
no password, no key. But when I need that access, if it's been authorized, we get that ephemeral SSH certificate that is signed just for this moment. Then it disappears, and I've been given that access, and it's for a particular period of time. So
Nice.
60 minutes of use, 5 minutes of idle time. That's configurable.
That's awesome and easy all at once. I like it. I have something a little bit different so I actually started using DPA myself, like just normally. But I kind of so nerd alert here. I'm going to nerd out a little bit. You may understand what I'm talking about, you may not, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Love it.
So the part where you had to bring to the table either a private IP address or an instance ID or something like that, I really didn't like the idea that I needed to track information that I am not always, it's not something that I can remember, right?
Aware.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something that I would have to look up separate from logging in to understand, or I would need some way of creating an alias, right, of sorts. And so what I did, I'm gonna share out my screen and kind of walk you through what I did and see what you think about it. Um, let me make sure I'm sharing out the right thing here. Allow. All right. So I'm gonna I'm gonna add mine. So this is my terminal, right? And so when you connect from a terminal to a target through DPA, depending on whether you're on ZSH or whatever, right, you'll add into your RC file. In my case, I'm using ZSH, so it's ZSH RC. Oh, I gotta actually cat it. Can't just say it. It basically it'll add some stuff to the end of it here, where it's going to give you like FSSH and flogin, FSSO, and so these functions are like how you're going to SSO right to the target resource using cyber-SSH and stuff like that. So what I did before we get too deep into it, so what I did was I was like, I want to kind of figure out how I can handle this instance ID thing a little bit easier so that I can provide friendly names. So what I did was utilized something called summon. I don't know if anybody is familiar with summon, but what summon allows us to do is to add secrets or at least define secrets in a YAML file that summon will fetch when you call it. And whatever you call after summon, it will inject those secrets as environment variables into that process. So I'll explain it more. I know it sounds kind of weird right now, but I have a secrets.yaml file. And to give you an idea of what it looks like, this is it. So summon meant for retrieving secrets and providing it to applications or processes, right, as environment variables. But what if I didn't have any secrets? I had instance IDs instead. Well, I don't know what an instance ID is by looking at it this way, but I know what this is, and I know what this is, and I know what this
Nice.
is, and this, and this. And so what I'm doing is I am still providing the instance ID when I'm calling and connecting to DPA, but I'm using summon in order to inject it when because I'm just calling the friendly name instead.
Right.
So I took it a step further and I'm like, I'm going to alias DPA as a whole. And so if we go back into my ZSHRC file, you'll see down here, this is basically where it ends, where our script is going to alias cyber-SSO for the f-SSO uh, command that's up here. Or sorry, not up here, but it's somewhere around here. Here it is, right here, right above it. Look, I'm blind. So it's basically aliasing that, and you'll do cyber-SSO to log in. So I was like, well, I want to call DPA instead. So I'm gonna alias DPA, and then I'm gonna call summon, and I'm gonna target that AWS instances section that we were just looking at in the secrets.yaml file. And then I'm gonna run a shell script that I created that is basically doing cyber SSO space and then injecting the environment, the instance ID name. And so when I type DPA, that's what's going to happen. And so what ends up happening is something like this, where I can just type in DPA client and summon will go fetch that instance ID, implant it in there for me. And then it should pop up and ask for my identity, password, and then prompt me for multi-factor authentication. So you can see here is my user, right? On Pineapple, the SSH for Pineapple, everything is coming back for me to log in. And so I can log in and instead of needing to remember that instance ID, now all I have to do is remember friendly names, and I can
Yeah.
do that, DPA connection to anything. So something that I wanted to share, probably not going to be helpful for anyone but me. But it would be cool if we eventually got to a state where DPA did support friendly names and there was some way that you could apply that. I know that DPA, when you say attribute based authentication, I'm sure it's a combination of attributes, but one of those attributes that it could be, I'd imagine, would be tags. And so maybe this is something where you could set a friendly name via a DPA tag applied to the resource that is read, and then that can be utilized alongside the instance ID, the private IP, and things like that. So consider this my enhancement request.
The most advanced enhancement request I've ever gotten. That's awesome. I mean, and it's I think it's very useful. I've had multiple customers be like, how are we supposed to have people know what to fill in for that information? We
Yeah.
don't share IP addresses out of the box, right? They don't get that information. They have the DNS name, the host name, the friendly name, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And so we've had another customer kind of do a script, right, that'll just do a lookup based off the information. So it kind of will map it out, or they'll type in what they know, and it'll do a DNS lookup, find the IP address or whatever, and connect. So kind of a different way of what you had there too.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
I am not as crazy in AWS or Azure or anything like that to understand how to tie into like their metadata services that they make
Right.
available and stuff. I'm sure there's some like really cool things that you could do there. I am good enough to have to deploy everything that I connected to via DPA was deployed using Ansible automation platform, and the aspects that tied it in with DPA were included as part of the user data. So basically it bootstrapped itself when Ansible created the EC2 instance. So I am that cool that I can automate, any EC2 instance that I'm deploying now, it's immediately ready for DPA because of that. So I'm getting there. I got some cool stuff happening. I definitely love the fact though that how easy it is to just like connect, give my identity information and move on. I don't have to think about, okay, I need to create a connection string for PSM. What account do I need to use? Right? Like that's basically like that is what I guess now is would be the instance ID. But if I created the connection using the connection guidance the way you did, it's not really something that I need to think about much unless I'm dealing with ephemeral instances where
Right.
they're very quickly spinning and dropping and I'm only going to have one time use. I can't imagine that's the case a majority of the time. I think that,
Right.
it there probably would be some use cases for that, but it wouldn't be as much as, the long living, access to a resource type deal.
Yep. Yep. For sure.
Cool. Well, Mike, we're not really getting many questions in from the chat, which is fine. That's fine. It happens. You know what that
Because I
means?
answered them all in my conversation.
You
Yeah.
it means one of two things. You did an amazing job, which is absolutely the fact. But it also means that everybody is watching on demand and they need to ask their questions in the comments so that you and I can go through the on demand comments and answer their questions that they may have watching this after the fact, which is completely fine with me. I prefer people to watch it on demand as well as live because it just means that they get more love from Joe and Mike Bykat. So I definitely want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and hang out with me for an hour and 45 minutes or so. Uh, Definitely don't want to forget about your two events that are happening in Seattle and in Denver this month. If
Yeah.
you happen to live in Denver or Seattle and are interested in learning more about zero standing privileges, just in time access, and whatever else Mike is going to be showcasing at the Identity Security Clinic for cloud security, reach out to your account executive, your customer success manager, your sales engineer, whoever from CyberArk you can get at. They will know how to get you to where you need to be to sign up and be available for that. Mike, anything else that you want to talk about before we call it a stream and end it here?
I think yeah, hope to see you guys somewhere, whether it's one of those sessions or whether it's Impact or somewhere else.
Yes.
But yeah, thanks for having me, Joe.
But I imagine you'd be on the cloud security booth at Impact. So everybody at least come by there, check out
Yeah.
Mike, ask him questions. I'll be there somewhere. I'm hoping I won't be on any booth. Chances are I will be.
I'll be working the booth from time to time. I'll be in some of the sessions, right?
Oh, okay.
Hopefully, yeah. So I'll come by the booth, but I don't think I'll be there the
Oh,
whole.
look at you. He's
Yeah,
growing
same
up.
like you. We'll be leading some sessions, my friend.
I hope
Yeah.
so. I don't really know what I've got going on quite yet, but you know how those fire drills typically go. I'll find out a couple weeks beforehand.
Yeah.
But you know what? We'll make magic happen. We'll have fun at Impact in Nashville. Mike, thank you again. And for everyone else out there, until next time, stay secure.